Hello, Lower L friends. This is Miss Stephanie on the primary playground. This week, you will be finding an earthworm of your own and learning about its body parts. You should have several sheets of paper clipped to the back of your kitchen science directions. These papers are coloring sheets with the different parts of the earthworm's body. I'll read you this little book so we can go over the earthworm's body parts. The earthworm. Earthworm. You would color the entire worm. This long, segmented invertebrate lives underground, creating tunnels while feeding on decaying plant matter. It has no eyes and a simple alimentary or digestive system. Earthworms are amazing invertebrates that improve soil by aerating it as they tunnel and by eating decaying plant matter and pooping it out in the form of castings, which make the soil more nutrient rich. Body. You would color the entire body. This is long, smooth, and soft. It consists of many circular joined segments and is tapered at each end. The head is very small. A mucus secretion, kind of like what comes out of your nose, is produced to enable the animal to slide easily in its underground environment. Mouth. So here you would color the small mouth parts near the worm's head. This small opening is located on the underside of the head. It is the beginning of the animal's crude alimentary or digestive system. Mouth. Cheta. These tiny hairs or bristles are attached to each segment. If you look closely, you can see that the tiny hairs are colored pink. Muscles allow them to be retracted and extended. They help the animal to grip surfaces and in some species aid in swimming. Earthworms have cheta instead of legs. Clitellum. That is this pink part right here. This collection of glands forms a cocoon which protects the developing eggs. It has the outward appearance of a cuff, like what's on my sleeve, or a saddle, like what you put on a horse. So this is how earthworms reproduce. Anal. Earthworms are in the invertebrate family annelid worms, which means they have annels or rings on their body. Colored is one circular section or ring of the annelid. Most annelids have about 150 of these segments. Anus. This is the rear opening in the end of the alimentary or digestive system. Waste products and undigested sand granules are expelled from here. Like earthworms, humans have mouths and anuses, which start and begin our digestive system. Anus. You would color the very end of the worm, near its tapered tail. I hope you enjoyed learning about the parts of an earthworm. I encourage you to color your sheets at home. You may arrange them into a booklet or flashcards if you want, but that's not required. Now, your next task is to find an earthworm of your own. Some of you might think this is tricky, but actually, worms live in the top inch or two of soil all around you, so it shouldn't be too hard to find one. I would recommend waiting for a rainy day or turning over a rock. Often, you can find worms underneath them. To find one at home, I dug in the first inch or so of a bare patch of dirt near the side of my house. You could also gently dig in a garden bed with your parents' permission, or perhaps go out at night with a flashlight, because earthworms are sometimes called night crawlers and are more active at night. Good luck. Once you've found your earthworm, please put it on a moist paper towel. Earthworms breathe through their wet or moist skin, so it's really important to keep them wet while you're working with them. I'm going to give you a few tips for proper handling of your earthworm. Please be gentle, and if you want to pick your worm up, I would recommend placing it on the top of your hand like this so it can crawl around. You can watch it move, feel the rings or annals on its body. Perhaps you might even want to run your fingers along it to see if you can feel the cheta or bristles. Observe that when the earthworm moves, it stretches out or extends and then retracts, kind of like a slinky. What does the worm feel like? Is it smooth or rough? Is it slimy? Can you feel the bristles on your hand? Once you're done with your earthworm, you could put it back on the paper towel and return it to where you found it. I hope you enjoy this activity. Once you have finished, draw your worm and label any parts you noticed while you were observing it. You can even draw what it looks like when your earthworm moves. Happy sciencing!
Wiggling Worms at Work by Wendy Pfeffer, illustrated by Steve Jenkins. Down in the ground, under your feet, thousands of worms wiggle around flower bulbs and tunnel under trees. They twist and turn, eating almost anything in their way. These wiggling worms are at work. Farmers plow their fields to loosen the soil. Crumbly soil lets the roots of plants spread out and grow. Worms also loosen the soil as they wiggle along. They are called nature's plows. As worms twist and turn, they push aside loose soil. This creates tunnels. Air flows along these tunnels. Rainwater trickles down. Roots drink it up. Moist ground helps plants grow better. Worms help to till the soil, aerating and moistening it. Worms tunnel in hard, packed soil by swallowing it. The soil goes in the worm's mouth, slides into the crop, then passes down to the gizzard. Worms do not have teeth. Mussels, fine grains of sand, and small stones in the gizzard grind the soil. Worms digest leaf and plant bits that are found in soil, just as you digest a salad. Can you think of any other animals that don't have teeth? Birds are one example of an animal without teeth. Birds also have gizzards to digest their food. What's left passes through a worm's body and comes out its tail end in the form of pellets called worm castings. These castings make good plant food. They help fruits and vegetables grow bigger and better. Sometimes worms crawl above ground. When they tunnel back down into the ground, they pull dead leaves and plants down with them. These plants make the soil better as they rot or decompose. Seeds come down too. Some of these seeds send out roots. Seedlings sprout. Worms help new plants begin to grow. Worms can wiggle, twist, turn, and even tie themselves in knots because they have no backbones. Do you remember the word for animals without backbones? That's right, it's an invertebrate. Their soft bodies are made up of rings or segments or annals. These segments act like the coils on a slinky toy. They let a worm bend. A worm has no legs, but 8 bristles under each segment act a little like legs. They help a worm move. Strong muscles allow the worm to stretch out its front end. It becomes long and thin. Then the worm fastens its front bristles to the soil. The back end slinks up, making the worm short and fat. The worm wiggles along, stretching and slinking, stretching and slinking. With all its wiggling, twisting, and turning, it's a wonder a worm knows where it's headed. It has no eyes, no nose, no ears, and hardly any brain at all. But a worm knows what's happening nearby. It feels vibrations on the ground and senses a hungry robin. Quickly, the worm slips back into its burrow. Hiding is the only way it can protect itself from enemies. Do you know of other animals that can feel vibrations? Fish are one example. They have a lateral line along their sides where they can feel vibrations in the water to know if predators are nearby. Worms also hide from the sun. They must live in damp soil since they breathe air through their moist skin. In the hot sun, their skin dries up and they can't breathe. In other words, worms are adapted to live underground. Sometimes worms crawl to the surface to find food. They select dead and decaying plants to drag back to their burrows. These plants contain bacteria that worms eat. Healthy plants do not. Worms pick leaves with pointed ends rather than round ones. No one knows why. Worms also eat fungi and mold. They slurp the hair-like strands of mold the same way you might slurp strands of spaghetti. Worms are amazing. They eat things that would make us sick. Worms eat at the entrance of their burrows. Then, each worm covers any leftover plants with its castings. This pile of worm castings is called a midden. It hides the top of the worm's burrow and acts like a door to keep out bad weather and rain. Have you seen earthworm castings before? Did you know you can buy bags of them at a garden store? In spring, before the weather warms, worms wiggle to the surface to mate. Worms are different from most other animals. Each worm is both male and female, but each one still needs a mate. After mating, each worm crawls back into its burrow. When the weather cools, a ring-like cocoon forms near the head of each worm that is mated. Slowly, the worm begins to move backwards. The cocoon inches forward on the worm's body, just as a ring on your finger would move. The cocoon passes over the openings of the worm's body. Up to 30 eggs slip out of the openings and into the cocoon. Excuse me. In a few minutes, the cocoon slips off the worm's head, just as the ring would slip off your finger. The ends of the cocoon close. Inside the cocoon, the eggs are fertilized. Scientists call a worm's cocoon a clitellum. Amazing! In about 3 weeks, the eggs hatch. Out of about 30 eggs, only 3 of the 4 wormlets emerge from each cocoon. They look like tiny pieces of cotton thread, less than an inch long. But they are fully developed worms and live completely on their own. They do not need their parents' help. The wormlets inch along, finding bits of dead plants to eat, dragging them to their tunnels and covering any leftovers with their castings. They wiggle underground, loosening the soil and making tunnels. Even tiny wormlets help the soil. These babies grow fast. In 6 weeks, they are adults. In winter, the soil near the surface freezes. The worms plug up their tunnels and move down to warmer soil. They stay there until spring. Then they wiggle up, tunneling, twisting, and turning until they're right under your feet again. In other words, worms hibernate. Vegetables and flowers grow better. Trees grow bigger. Grass grows greener because there are thousands of wiggling worms at work. Worms are amazing. The